Good stewards know, in the upside-down world of Jesus, if we want to truly live, we must first die. Catherine Marshall was an author. She either wrote or edited more than 30 books. And one of them was When We Learn to Trust God. In that book, Catherine Marshall wrote about an episode in her life. She had TB. She had tuberculosis for a long time. And she prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed for God to take it away. Didn't happen. She went to see doctor after doctor after doctor after doctor. The tuberculosis persisted. And she got very depressed. One day, Catherine heard about a missionary who had a very similar situation. He had a chronic illness. He prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed to God, take it away, God, but it didn't happen. He saw doctor after doctor after doctor. Doctors couldn't get rid of it. But finally, the missionary said, okay, God, I get it. Look, your will, not mine. I don't like it, but if it's your will, I'll be an invalid. 2 weeks later, he was healed. Catherine pondered that story. Didn't quite know what to make of it. But her circumstances remained pretty much the same. She had TB, she prayed, she went to doctors, nothing happened. And finally, she gave up and said pretty much the same thing. God, I don't like it, I don't want it, I want to get rid of it. But if you want me to be sick and not healthy, I'll accept it. Why do I tell that story? I tell that story because it fits today's gospel passage. In today's gospel passage, Jesus talks about a grain of wheat. It's a parable. You and I, we're the grain of wheat. And Jesus says, here's the deal with a grain of wheat. If you put it on a table somewhere, it won't do any good. You got to put it in the ground, and it will die. But then God takes over. And that grain of wheat sprouts up, and it becomes a wheat plant. And we harvest the wheat and turn it into flour and then into life-giving bread. Nothing happens with that grain of wheat, nothing happens with us until we let go and let God do his thing. And that's what Catherine Marshall and that missionary finally did. They let go and let God. They didn't want to be chronically sick, and they told God, I don't want it, I don't like it. But if it's your will, I'll do it. Did Jesus walk his talk? You bet. The night before he died in the garden, Jesus told his dad over and over and over, I don't want this. I can see what's coming. It's going to really hurt. I'm going to be in so much agonizing pain, I won't be able to stand it. But then he added, but your will be done, not mine. Now that's the secret to life. So much happens in our lives that we don't like and we don't want. And it's perfectly okay to pray to God to get rid of it. It's perfectly okay not to like it, not to want it, to tell God, it's terrible, I don't like it, and I don't want it. But then we've got to add, but God, your will, not mine. We're not going to flower. We're not going to be like that grain of wheat until we do that. Until we tell God, your will, not mine. Yours, not mine. Now, I'm here to tell you that There are two important reasons for us to let go and let God. One is so that we can have happiness in this life. You know, I'm a priest. I counsel people, and what do I hear most of the time? If it's marriage counseling, if there's a marriage in deep, deep doo-doo, what I hear is both sides sticking to their arguments, not willing to change, not willing to die the least bit to what they want to happen in their marriages. They want the other one to become a clone of him or a clone of her. They don't want to learn from the other, learn from each other and grow. They don't want to die to anything in their lives. So their marriage remains in deep doo-doo. Jackie and I, our marriage got into deep doo-doo, and we eventually said, look, we got to go to counseling. Each of us has to change, and we did. And we learned from each other, and we brought God into our lives. We died to what each of us had insisted to that point was the right way to live in marriage. And in dying to ourselves, letting go and letting God, our marriage became terrific. Suppose you drink too much, you drug too much, you're an alkie, a druggie, but you refuse to go to rehab or to 12 steps. Real men don't do that. Well, trust me, if you don't die to yourself and go to the rehab, go to the 12 steps, you're going to remain an alkie or a druggie. You've got to die to yourself. Kaki was an alcoholic. She died to herself. She went to rehab. She went to 12 steps. And her life flourished when she let go and let God. It just absolutely spectacularly flourished. She helped so many people after she let go and let God. There may be someone in your life you just say, I can't forgive that person. Well, that's another case of, I'm not going to die to myself. I know better than anyone else, including God. God says forgive all, but to hell with God. Unless we die to ourselves, we're not going to be happy in this life. My dad was not a good dad. I've told you a number of times. My dad had lots of problems. But not until later in my life, when I learned to forgive my dad and turn my life over to God, did happiness creep into my life. When Kaki died, I knew how to let go and let God. So I thought about it, and I said, okay, God, I'm going to die. I'm going to die to the big job, the big salaries, the big bonuses, the big house, the big cars. I'm going to die to all of that. But darn it, you better do your job and give me some happiness in this life. Well, as I've told you many times, I have never been happier. My last 10 years of marriage were fabulously happy, but I'm happier now than I have ever been. And it all comes from dying to myself, letting go, and letting God. My sisters and brothers, we are all called to be good stewards. And good stewards know in the upside-down world of Jesus Christ, the only way to truly live is to first die.